Is record on? I don't see it. Yeah, it is. I think it is. Okay. It is on, I guess. Oh, now it's too low. Yeah, now it's crooked. Alright. Yeah, it's still too low. I'm a perfectionist. Oh, it matters. Yeah, it didn't. That'll probably work. Okay. It's still too low. This is supposed to be a short report. It's already too long. Yeah, I'll try that. Okay, this is recently, well, they've had Bush's funeral. HW and the corporate media, is bringing out a lot of things about him. I noticed Figueroa had a report recently about, that he was a bloody president, warmongering. Yeah, I think he has a claim. But I mean, it's good to bring out good things about people when they die, but I don't think it's good to push an ideology and call it perfect. And he had an ideology that wasn't perfect. A lot of things about it. I think it's really dangerous, to promote ideologies that way without bringing out the other side. And I think, and this is what I'm trying to do, bring out the other side. I know there was a couple people on talk shows that brought it out too. But HW is not, the corporate media wants to paint Bush as perfect because he was in bed with corruption, really. He was part of it. He was a pioneer of campaign finance corruption. And so they're going to paint Bush as the perfect president, and while Trump's trying to stop the corruption, give us back our one man, one vote, at least to a degree, and support the majority against the will of the 1%. Well, that's why they're making Trump to be this big monster and HW to be perfect. But okay, the first thing, I know there's a lot of people that support Bush, and me coming out and saying it's going to make a lot of people mad. He's awfully divisive. But I think you need to look at the other side of it. It's really dangerous. First place, Ronald Reagan was a far better president than Bush, and the corporates keep arguing that Reagan won, that Bush didn't win the re-election because it was just it just happened to be the economy was bad when he got out. Okay, that's not the whole truth. There were good reasons he didn't win. Look, Reagan won in 49 states. He won by a landslide for the second term. And the only state he lost in was Minnesota. He lost by a small margin. Bush didn't even get reelected. And there's good reasons for this. This didn't happen by accident. And the Fox News and the corporates may argue, they want you to believe that, but that's not the truth. There's a lot of things that Bush was doing wrong, and Ross Perot brought him out in the debate. And the main thing was, first of all, he supported campaign finance corruption. They asked him about the campaign finance system. Well, and he said, well, it's perfectly legal. So he supported it, and he was part of it. He was a pioneer. And that's when jobs started going overseas. The big sucking sound south, as Ross Perot brought out. Which, what does that do? Like I said in the previous report, the government doesn't meet the needs of the people. It destroys the American dream. It destroys the standard of living. And that the campaign finance system, brought out at the time that the reason the GATT and NAFTA were signed, they were rammed through Congress. Well, look, what does that mean when something's rammed through? It's like I say, we used to have a dog that would sleep in the flower bed, and the mom would chase, it was nice and cool, and smashed all the flowers. And mom kept, chasing it out. Well, every time mom pulled up in the car, the dog would get out of the flower bed. The dog knew it wasn't supposed to be in the flower bed. This is the same thing. If they rammed it through Congress, they knew it was a screw job. So why would the government collude with something that was a screw job? There's a good reason, because they're getting campaign money. They needed that campaign money to get reelected, and this is what Bush supported. He said he did. He was part of it. He's where it started. And to say he was perfect, he wasn't. And what does that do? Well, government doesn't meet the needs of the people. People can't feed their families. Jobs going overseas. And pretty soon it's so bad. It's like the situation we had. We broke away from England. It'll get that bad eventually. And Ross Perot brought this all out. Now, I don't know how the corporate media forgot all this. Okay, Trump's this big monster. Jobs went overseas under Bush. He supported the campaign finance corruption. Anyway, they also noticed that when Clinton, when he sat down, when Trump came to the funeral, and he sat down next to him and Melania, sat down next to Obama, you notice everybody shook hands. I know I saw Clinton shake hands with Trump, but the only one that didn't was Hillary. Well, what is that? Sore loser. The sore loser syndrome. Why come CNN didn't bring that out? They kept calling it an awkward moment. I think that's why, because Trump's trying to drain their swamp. Okay. Let's see. Okay, the other thing that bothers me about these reports that I've been hearing lately, they've totally neglected Ronald Reagan, who was snubbed, I think, and forgotten, because they argue that Bush is the one that signed that caused the dismantling of communism. Actually, that was Ronald Reagan that did that. He's the one that put the peacemaker in there, and he did that at a time when you had a pretty level-headed ruler of Russia who was going to negotiate with him, a bargaining peace. And that was done under Ronald Reagan. It may have happened under Bush. So it was really Ronald Reagan. It was Ronald Reagan that set the wheels in motion for German reunification, too. Where they're giving Bush all the credit when Reagan was snubbed. And I don't think that's good either. Okay, they talk about morality. Bush was the most moral president we've ever had. Okay, really he wasn't. Look, he's someone that needs to read the Bible. I mean, he claimed to be religious and moral. But what does the Bible say? When you walk up to him and ask about campaign finance corruption, it's perfectly legal. What does that tell you? He hasn't read the Bible. What's that one commandment? What's the first thing you think of when you think of the Bible? The 10 Commandments. I always do. Well, what about the one that talk about thou shalt not covet? Thou shalt not ram a gap through Congress to the detriment of everyone else so you can pad your wallet. That's called coveting. Thy neighbor's farm, thy neighbor's ox, or anything of thy neighbor's. What about thy neighbor's right to one man, one vote? Like I say, he's one that needed to read the Bible. He was not as moral as they claim. Okay, and he destroyed the American dream. People can't feed their families. He was in church, but he didn't read very well. Getting out of the war, as Figueroa brings out. He was a bloody president. I think in a lot of ways he was. Look, I think the wars could have been avoided. And he wasn't a very good president. I don't know if I blame him quite as much as Figueroa. Because they were, the public supported him. The people that signed up wanted to go to war. But like it resulted in a lot of people being killed that shouldn't have been. But then everybody did that, but, everybody supported war. They wanted a strong America, and flex their muscle, do a good job, where we'd lost wars. We lost the Vietnam War, and Reagan went down, and he wasn't very good either. He went down to Grenada, and, 3,000 people live there. We didn't really do much, and, to show that we were a strong country, but, so he did do that, and I give him a little credit, but those wars could have been avoided. I know for a fact that in Iraq, the military was ordered to protect the oil fields. We also know that Bush owned 3 oil companies, and it's never been made clear to the public how much this war had to do with the oil business, with their oil business. They never really told us that. We know that Saddam was destroying oil fields in Kuwait, burning them. We notice a pattern. Like with global warming. Sometimes you figure out how global warming works. That we've had 7 ice ages since the dinosaurs. We know that when the dinosaurs were here, you know, the dinosaurs, the climate didn't change for billions and billions of years. I don't know how many. You know, it's like a great big ratio like that to that. You know, so you could figure out that if we had a pattern of ice ages and that we were scheduled for another ice age right now and the same distance between all of them is probably in the case. But if it was, you would figure that probably the global warming would upset the currents in the ocean. And you have an ice age, and that may have been what caused all the previous ones. The very same thing. You don't know, which could be some. But anyway, what I'm trying to make, you can learn things from studying patterns. But did you ever notice there's a pattern going on with a president, 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 HW, president, W? And you notice, you look, no war, no war, no war, no war, war for oil companies, no war, another war for big oil. And it's always when it's Bush. What does that tell you? You know, you study that pattern. You almost wonder if Dukakis had been elected, would we have had a war with Saddam? You almost wonder, would we have even needed one? Okay, notice Trump used diplomacy to start wars, like with Kim Jong-un. And we had a liberal professor at UNL who pointed out that if we had kept a dialogue going with Castro, you know, and dealt with him and traded with him, we probably would have avoided the Cuban Missile Crisis. Well, and then you talk to Saddam, let's see, instead, you know, no dialogue, no trade, wrote him off. You talk to Saddam, and you can see what trouble was. I mean, Saddam was kind of like a criminal, but like I say, some of the worst criminals, even the clutter murderers, they were level-headed on one level. And if you can get to their level-headed part, sometimes you can deal with them and avoid a war. And HW didn't even attempt it, which Trump would have, yeah, probably. You know, attempted that first, and we also know that in the Iraq War, Saddam started dealing with the EC. What, you know, instead of the United States, what did that do? That kicked the American oil companies in the balls. This is right before the Iraq War. And if you talk to Saddam, he said he liked Ronald Reagan, but he hated the Bushes. Well, that's pretty much the way I feel. I say he was fairly level-headed. Wasn't, but anyway, and, you know, but it looks like, hey, maybe diplomacy would have worked here. And so they were fighting over oil. That's what I wonder. That's what I wonder. They were fighting over oil. Well, that's where I say Figueroa has a case. He was unnecessarily bloody. I think he was. Okay. And then the other problem with Bush, let's see. Is that all of them? Yeah, I think it was. He was oblivious to the ghetto and the black race. He had a situation where the only two options for the black race to work was McDonald's and Walmart, and they were drug dealing, to make the ends meet. You keep their head above water. Well, so how does Bush help them with that? Well, he gives them a 30-year sentence. Drugs. I'm thinking he was the one that caused the problem in the first place with his jobs overseas and his corruption. And then here he is, that's how he rewards them and helps them out, gives them a 30-year drug sentence. I think, does that make sense? That's coveting. Like I say, thou shalt not covet. He violated it again. His morality wasn't up to standards. And, okay, and his world order. That was a world dictatorship. You know, he wanted to go down and get Noriega out of Panama for drug running. Well, we don't have any jurisdiction over Panama. You know, Panama is outside of our borders. So he was a self-appointed GM of the world. So, yeah, self-appointed. He was not within his jurisdiction. An international law professor, he pointed this out when I was at UNL. And he said, is it okay for us to go in, for Iran to come into the United States and get the Shah who we were protecting? Probably not. You know, he was violating Panama's sovereignty. You know, and well, in his Bible he wrote himself, really. His morality and his world order was his own Bible. And what does the Bible say? And thou shalt have no other gods before God, which essentially says the human mind is fallible. So you don't make your own Bible, you don't write it yourself, and you don't enforce it yourself. And if someone does that, you don't necessarily believe everything they do is moral. And that's what the Bible tells you. Thou shalt have no other gods before God. The human mind is fallible, whether it's the president, whether it's the police, whether it's your country, whoever it is, the human mind is fallible. Okay. Whether it's the Dixie Chicks, whatever. Okay, the other thing, he supported the flag burning law. Okay, well, what's wrong with this? Well, if you have a law against flag burning, you have a reason to burn the flag. Because the flag, you have a right to dissent. And burning the flag symbolizes dissent and that right. So if you don't have a flag burning law, there's no reason to dissent. And you have a law, that's a reason to burn it. Well, that's called a paradox. And I told them that at work. I said the Bushes aren't intelligent enough to understand what a paradox was. And somebody says, I bet W can't even pronounce that word. Well, that's the problem. I think partly they aren't bright enough. They aren't complex enough to even understand all that. And that's why they don't agree with it. It's outside their intellectual range. And the other thing, the corporate media, is like the corporate media. The final thing I want to say is, people, what I see with Trump, and I use an analogy. We had a kid in the neighborhood that had the vicious dog, and he's going around sicking it on all the neighbors. You know, he'd be doing stuff in your yard, screwing around, causing trouble, and so his mom would go out and bitch at him. Well, he'd get his dog, his vicious dog, and sick it on her. Well, no one could do anything about it because their dad was an attorney who was prominent in town. And he tried to get the preacher to get the dog off the church, and he wouldn't do it because he was afraid of that lawyer that was prominent. This is the same thing with Bush. You know, he tries to protect the border so our standard of living goes up, and the Spanish race can have a standard of living where they can make enough money to feed their family, the ones that are here legally. And because of all the, the swamp, the prominence of the corruption that's involved, he can't do anything about it. And it's the same thing, pretty much. But anyway, that's why I'm saying that the CNN and the corporate media and the companies that own the corporate media want to paint Trump as a bad guy. Like I say, instead of bringing out that Hillary was the one causing the trouble and was a sore loser, that Trump's a bad guy, create awkward situation. And paint Bush as this perfect God when he was the one that started their corruption, caused all their corruption, and they're still part of it. And of course, that's why they want everybody to think he was God. That's why I think we need to talk, speak out against that. And I guess that's all I got to say. I hope it didn't go over time.